Friday passed faster than John had expected. Lizzie was nearby at all times and they ate lunch together, but things were almost normal. Almost. Just when he started to get comfortable, she would give a giggle that went on a little too long, or slide a hand toward him or slid a hand toward where she hid her knife, or respond far more enthusiastically than she should. Was it bad of him to think she was really cute despite all that? She could be nice if it wasn't so, well... But John hated it when his friend suggested he could be fun if he wasn't depressed, and that thought left an ugly knot in his stomach. Well, it wasn't long now. Maybe she could get some real help. He made through his last class, almost slipped through his session with Mrs. Smythe, then headed home. John finished his homework and chores as fast as he could and went to sleep. Going out in public always drained him, and he wanted to have enough energy for the weekend. He woke up too early, eyes gritty and head still mired in half-remembered dreams. John got up to get a drink and happened to glance out the window. Lizzie was standing outside his house with a huge smile on her face. After staring at her for a moment, John groaned and went back to bed. The second time he woke up, the sun had already risen. He felt a little better, but not much. Normally he would stay at home all weekend, but he couldn't do that if he wanted to help Lizzie. She was still staying outside his house in exactly the same place with exactly the same cheerful expression. John brushed his teeth, got dressed, combed his hair. He realized that he was acting like he was getting ready for a date. True, he had sort of accepted her confession. John decided that was just what he'd have to deal with now if he wanted to have a connection with her. Well, at least he was going to go out with a cute girl. He hadn't done that since middle school, and those were childish relationships. Of course, this was the only way he could get a date. Pathetic. Finishing his preparations, John headed outside. He hadn't noticed from his house, but Lizzie had gotten dressed up for the occasion. He'd never seen her outside her school uniform, and it made him hesitate for a moment. She'd obviously put effort into making herself look good, and she did. It would have been nice if not for how it made him worry about the level of importance she was attaching to the day. As soon as Lizzie saw him, her smile became even brighter than it had been while waiting. "John, I'm ready." "Good morning, Lizzie. Did you sleep all right?" "Oh, I didn't sleep. Let's go." She practically dragged him down the street, apparently heading for the bus station. Yet instead of looking forward, her gaze was fixed behind her on him. "Do you have a plan, John? This is our first date. It needs to be perfect." Shit. He should have known she'd treat it this way. It wasn't like he hadn't had enough time. He used to be good at planning. What was wrong with him? Other than clinical depression. God, he was such a mess. Alright, he had to think. He used to be able to think on his feet. He could do this. So, I want to deal with the medication issue first, so the rest of the day can be fun, right? Sure, whatever you want. If we get a blood test, we'll need to wait a while. I was thinking we'd get the test first, then eat breakfast, then get the results. That should give us the entire rest of the day. That's such a great plan. Let's hurry. John was glad to hear her respond so happily, but wondered if she would have said that no matter what he told her. They took a bus across town to the farthest pharmacy and ordered a standard Koitek sampling. He'd been nervous that Lizzie might react poorly to the needle, but she just smiled sweetly at him while they took a bit of her blood, and then hopped back up. "Look, the Band-Aid has little kitties on it. It's so cute." "You want to eat something now, then?" "Yes." They walked to a nearby bakery and he brought them a pair of pastries. One of the advantages of his workaholic father was at least he had a decent amount of spending money. Lizzie held hers in both hands and began cheerfully nibbling on the end of it. She stared at him while she was doing it, but otherwise she looked ordinarily cute instead of scarily cute. Num num num. I didn't know you could act silly. I don't hear you laugh very often. You usually look so sad, and that makes me sad too. And like that, his good mood crumbled. I know, I'm always ruining everything. I don't know why no one stays near me when I should. No. Lizzie took his pastry and stuffed it in his mouth to shut him up. You're not depressing at all, John. Just being around you makes me feel warm inside. I just want to see you smile more. When you smile, I feel like maybe everything will be alright. His attempt to talk around the pastry made Lizzie giggle, which made him laugh, which just set off a vicious cycle. After a fit of coughing, he had lost half his pastry, but regained his good mood. It had been a long time since an emotional downturn had sent him spiraling toward depression. Lizzie grinned at him and he smiled back at her. All at once, he felt guilty for trying to convince her to take medication. Who was he to tell her what to do? Worse, was he manipulating her obsession like this? It was only to help her, but did that make it any better? The thoughts troubled him, but they remained in the back of his mind as they finished eating, talking lightly. But then they were finished, and it had been a while since the test. It was time to go back. Let's go get the results, okay? Will John think differently about me? No, I just want to find a way to help you, okay? Okay. She answered cheerfully, but something in the lightheartedness they had shared was gone, and it wasn't coming back. Swallowing, John steeled himself and walked with her back to the pharmacy. Lizzie slowed near the entrance, then shuffled backward. I'll stay here. You can bring me what I need, okay? Okay, no problem. Inside, he found the pharmacist writing something on a clipboard. When he spotted John, he immediately frowned. You're alone? I suppose it's for the best anyway. We need to talk. Is something wrong? She's not sick, is she? It isn't that kind of test. It only takes a snapshot of a person's current condition. Is your friend going through a difficult time right now? Well, I mean, maybe a little. These are some extraordinary numbers. Most people only see those briefly during the worst days of their lives. Take care of her until things pass, alright? Okay. There's something else I have to ask. It won't be comfortable, but it's necessary. Have you ever gotten any sense that she might hurt herself or anyone else? No, I can't imagine her doing anything like that. The lie was out of his mouth before he'd even consciously decided to lie. John regretted it immediately. Yet, now it was too late to contradict himself. The pharmacist grunted and looked over his papers. Well, keep a close eye on her. Even the gentlest person can be capable of violence under conditions like these. Is it really that bad? I thought she seemed better lately. No, there must be some recent trauma she hasn't told you about. I'm certain of it. I mean, someone with numbers like these regularly, they'd be completely incurable. Insane, probably, and definitely a threat to society. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to imply anything. I'm sure she'll work through things and go back to normal soon. So, can you prescribe anything? I can give you 2 weeks of either Yandequel or Nilazine. That should get her over her rough patch. Just 2 weeks. Can't you prescribe more? Not without a much more extensive evaluation, but like I said, that's all you'll need. I'm sure she'll recover soon. I really should be asking her directly, but in her present condition, I think it'd be safer to bend the rules and let you act like a family member. So, which do you think would be best for her? This sounds most like nihilism, so we'll go for this one. 2 weeks of Nilazine coming up. Try to help her rest, okay? Yeah, okay. Heading outside, John handed the bag to Lizzie. He had pushed pretty hard to get to this point, but he would never force her to take the medication. His father used to talk like he didn't have a choice about depression medication, practically threatened to force-feed him. John refused to do that to anyone else. But Lizzie didn't make an issue of it at all. Smiling at him, she opened the bag, shook out one of the pills, and swallowed it without even taking a drink. She had given the label a careful look, though. Okay, I hope you can love me now, John. Lizzie, no, I never meant anything like that. Please don't. That didn't taste bad at all. So can we go on with our date now, John? Can we? He wanted to go back to what she had said, reassure her that he meant nothing wrong by it, but his words stuck in his mouth. Maybe on some level he did mean to force her. Maybe he was repeating everything that had been done to him. But with Lizzie smiling at him like that, he couldn't fall too far into depression. Instead, John smiled back and gestured for her to follow. Without any great ideas, John thought they should go to the park. Their town had a pretty nice park, and it was usually empty this time of day. His friends always said that a movie was the best first date, but he suspected they mostly wanted to try to cop a feel. Besides, he was worried Lizzie would end up watching him instead of the movie. In the park, Lizzie happily skipped along the paths, often looking back at him, but at least looking at a lot of other things. As he watched, he realized that she was definitely calmer than usual. Her sweet cheerfulness seemed natural, not manic. She even smiled at people that passed them sometimes. Could it really be the Nilazine? With him, the Paxidine had taken weeks to work, and whether or not it actually helped him had been really unclear. Then again, Lizzie was her own case. Of course, it took more than drugs to cure a serious condition. He knew that all too well. As Mrs. Smythe had said, therapy was also an important component of recovery. Hers had certainly helped him a lot. The third main component was a social support network, and there he completely failed to take her advice. He still spent most of his time alone or in meaningless old relationships. But hey, now he was walking in a park with a girl his age. Maybe things were looking up. And for once in his life, things went his way. Lizzie was happy to eat fast food for lunch and didn't even try to feed him anything. Afterward, he was pretty much out of plans and Lizzie didn't want to stop. Fortunately, she was happy to drag him around town to see random things. In a way, he was grateful for that. He had spent all his energy for making decisions during the morning. It was easy to just glide along in her wake. That way, she was a good match for him. When the sun started setting, John was actually surprised. Had the day really passed by that quickly? He could barely drag himself through a lot of weekends. This was a welcome change. Holy shit, is that John? With a girl? Hey guys. Is that the crazy chick you told me about? Yeah, that's definitely her. Are you that desperate, John? Given how much of a sad sack he's been lately, I'm pretty sure he is. Do any of you have girlfriends? You guys talk so much shit. Just leave Lizzie out of it, okay? Oh, fuck you, John. She wasn't crazy. You could never get a girl as cute as her. She is pretty hot. I don't get why she's with you. Yeah, this really doesn't make any sense. Oh, John, are you gonna cry? Better not, or she'll realize how pathetic you are. His positive mood was completely gone. He knew he should check to see how Lizzie was taking the mocking, but it was the most he could do not to fall into a mire of self-hatred. As always, he felt like he should be stronger than this, less emotionally fragile, and that just added to his self-hatred. If it had been anyone else, he might have just crashed completely. But he knew these guys, and he was at least familiar with their attitudes. John pulled himself together and faked a smile at them. Sounds like sour grapes to me. You all have fun with each other, okay? Come on, Lizzie, let's get out of here. His classmates just scoffed. John considered taking Lizzie's hand and pulling her away, but worried about how she would react. And after a moment of hesitation, it was too late. Listen here, you piece of... Without warning, Lizzie stepped past John and directly into his classmates' faces. He caught a glimpse of her, and she seemed strangely focused. Then he could only see the back of her head. John is a good person. Holy shit, she's practically humping you, Ethan. You shouldn't say unkind things about good people. Her voice sounded sweet, but his classmates took several steps backward. John was certainly very grateful that he couldn't see her face. I've had a nice day today. I hope you all have a nice day, too. Fuck this, we're out! They scrambled, just barely slow enough that they weren't running away. Lizzie stayed exactly where she'd been standing, entirely still. John wanted to say something, but his mouth was too dry. Let's keep going, okay, John? Sure. But they hadn't gone far before John realized that he couldn't follow up on that. He had pulled himself together long enough to walk away, but now he had nothing left. It was all too much. He wasn't usually outside and in public this much, and though being with Lizzie wasn't bad, he wasn't stable enough for this much interaction. John, are you okay? I'm tired. I think I need to go home. Is something wrong? Did I do something wrong? He could hear the tremor in her voice, knew she needed information, but the apathy was choking him to death. He had no energy for anyone else, no energy for anything but getting back home, curling up and wishing he was dead. Somehow he said goodbye, found the bus, and got all the way back home. The events passed like he was suffocating in gauze, the world around him too unreal to have any effect. Maybe he should have reassured Lizzie, but it didn't matter. He was an idiot for thinking he could help her. Nothing he did mattered. Sunday was a miserable slog through every second. John gave up on accomplishing anything whatsoever and just lay in bed feeling worse about himself. He fell asleep early and woke up in the early morning, not feeling better. That was impossible after a day wallowing in himself. But suddenly, his energy was back, and he needed it, because he hadn't accomplished anything he needed to do over the weekend. He set to work feverishly on Monday's homework. By the time he needed to go to school, his eyes were gritty and his good mood was gone, but he was ready, high-functioning. John sighed and headed to school. He hadn't gotten very far before, without warning, Lizzie was walking beside him. Good morning, John. Morning. Are you all right, Lizzie? I spent yesterday thinking. I've come to some conclusions. So, what did you conclude? For such a long time, the most I could imagine was being near you, talking to you. But now I see that's not enough. You have to be protected. I have to do it. Lizzie, what they said to you, it made me so angry. I wanted to kill them. Then you'd be safe. Wait, you didn't? No, I didn't. Because you have to be protected from me too. What? Since I took the medicine, I see things differently. I don't like it, but I understand better now. I don't want you to be afraid of me, John. I'll protect you, no matter what. She seemed sad, but so sincere. What was he supposed to say to something like that? You don't need to say anything. Don't worry. Please don't worry. I'll protect you. That's all I can do. I had a really good time on Saturday. I mean it. I'm glad to see you happy too. John is so kind. Too kind. I'll see you later. She rushed away too quickly, leaving John completely uncertain what to think. In some ways, she seemed more stable. Yet that wasn't a complete comfort. Lizzie was still carrying her knife. On Tuesday, John and Lizzie ate lunch together as if everything was normal. And in some bizarre way, it really was. Perhaps due to the medication, she seemed so much more stable than before. She was sweet and kind at all times, always considerate and affectionate. Yet there was the occasional moment when he saw a hint of something feral in her eyes. He worried about what she would be capable of if she thought it was necessary. But all in all, John was happier than he had been in a long time. His classmates even stopped messing with him about Lizzie, though he wasn't sure if that was because she seemed normal or because they were afraid of her. Yet he wasn't. Not really. He had a hard time believing that anyone could really love him, yet it seemed that Lizzie truly did. If anything, he worried that he could never love her back that intensely. He had an appointment scheduled with Mrs. Smythe on Wednesday, yet for once when he walked into her office, he didn't feel like he desperately needed it. Ready for your session today, John? Actually, I'm feeling really good. Maybe we should skip today's. You should know better than that. If you stop the treatment that's making you feel better, you might have another relapse. No, you're right. Sorry. Don't be sorry. Just lie down and take a load off. So, how have you been doing lately? Well, I'm okay, I guess. That's better than most weeks, so it looks like you're making progress. By the way, I've seen you pass with a girl. Are you two dating? We're going full romance. Yes, we're dating. That's probably good for you. You need more relationships. But I have to ask, have the two of you been intimate? What? How could you ask that? I'm not teasing you. This is a very serious question. You'd better not be leading up to giving me a lecture about safe sex or abstinence or anything. So, should I take that as a no? Yes, I mean, no. We haven't done anything like that. It's good to hear that you're at least expressing interest. Koitek got back to me about erozapam, and it's still decades from viability, so we don't have a solid option for libido issues. Can we talk about something else? Anything else? Sorry to make you uncomfortable, John, but I do need to be concerned about your welfare in all respects. To that end, I need to ask one more question. Has the girl ever displayed any strange behavior or erratic tendencies? No, she's perfectly normal. I can't think of anything. She's a little shy, maybe, that's all. Well, good. I'm glad to hear it. I'm not being rude, John. This is important. You see, I looked at that girl's records, and to my surprise, I actually knew her mother. You knew Lizzie's mother? Yes, Abby Doss took part in one of our early clinical trials. She was one of the women who had to be removed from the study when we learned that they had lied. When they lied about being pregnant at the time? That should be she lied. Plus, I thought she displayed addictive tendencies. I understand she began abusing prescription painkillers later in life, too. Poor girl had a hard childhood. So anyway, I just hope that the girl turned out alright. Any drugs taken while someone is in utero can have permanent long-term impacts, so I'm glad the girl turned out normal. Moving on, you seem so much better. I assume the issue of emotional grayness took care of itself. Yeah, of course. Mrs. Smythe seemed so positive he couldn't bring himself to tell her the truth, because despite the general improvement in his life, that aspect of it had not. Lizzie was a single spot of color in his world. but the rest was even grayer than before. The rest of their session passed in a gray blur. When it was over, John was in a strange mood. He felt a little better, but not much. Usually after a therapy session he floated in an empty tranquility, but now his mind was racing. He impatiently sat through his next class, but his mind was on what Mrs. Smythe had said about Lizzie's mother. Could that be part of the reason for her instability? When he had a free period, John headed straight to the library and tried to look at past incidents. It was hard to find information on Koitek's old trials, but when he eventually gave in and looked at the microfilm, he actually found some relevant articles. He knew that Lizzie had been born in 1972, so he was able to skim back to around the time she had been born. He actually found the birth announcement in the local paper easily, but for the rest, he was left searching aimlessly through shitty local articles. And then, all at once, it was easy. There was a series of articles that took his research from a boring whim to something that had him on the edge of his seat. Apparently before it was called Koitek, the company had been called Pharmavax. They had rebranded after a series of drug recalls had ruined their reputation. John sat back, unable to read any further. Was that really the explanation? It felt so cheap. It was easy to presume that Lizzie's mother had been involved in one of the recalled Pharmavax trials, and her unborn child must have suffered the consequences. Could that really have unbalanced Lizzie this way? If so, that meant that this was no phase she was going through. If her early development had been altered, she was probably this way for life. Yet, the second emotion he felt was anger. Anger that Mrs. Smythe or anyone else could think that Lizzie was just some freak chemical accident. It was too much like the scorn that had been heaped on him for his depression. Whatever her problems, Lizzie was a person who deserved respect. Help, but respect before anything else. Depression quickly followed on the heels of his anger. Unable to deal with any more of those thoughts, John just walked out without even replacing the microfilm. He drifted through the rest of the day, still stewing over what he'd learned. At times, he could almost convince himself that this was a good thing. If drugs had unbalanced Lizzie, maybe they could balance her again. He could almost imagine them together, helping each other, maybe even getting married. When she passed him in the hallway, her eyes lit up. Not in mere elation, but with a burning intensity. And in that moment, John was sure that Lizzie couldn't be cured. The question was, did he want her to be? Several days later, as they were leaving after school, Lizzie caught up with him, an odd look on her face. John, I'm so happy. Really? I spent so long just watching you, imagining what it would be like to say hello, to hear you say my name, for you to look at me. That we can actually talk like this. It's like a dream. A wonderful dream I never want to end. I'm happy I met you too, Lizzie. This past week has been fun. Say, how is the nilazine working out for you? No unpleasant side effects? It's wonderful. Thank you so much for giving it to me. Well, I hope we can find you some more once this dose runs out. Some drugs you can renew week to week, but I don't know about this one. Could be a pain. Oh no, I wouldn't want you to go to any trouble for me. But it's helping, right? I want you to be able to have more if you want it. That's so sweet, but it's not necessary. It helped me understand our relationship clearly. I don't need it anymore. But John, we've been dating since you accepted my confession, but we've only done normal things. I love being with you, every single moment. But can we do something more romantic? They might as well. People already thought of them as dating, and she'd seemed so sweet for so long. What was the worst that could happen? Please? We have a lot of options, considering that we all have next week off. But we don't have to wait that long. How about we plan something for Friday night? I don't have a car to pick you up, but I can take you to a nice restaurant. Yes, yes, yes! Good then. It's a plan. Friday, 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 Friday. She would still have a day or two of medication left on Friday. John figured she would stay stable. Maybe the date would leave her happy enough that she'd change her mind about staying on her meds. No matter what mistakes her mother made, maybe Lizzie could be stable with the right treatment. John really thought this could work out between them. John, this place is so nice. As nice a place as they'll let high school kids in with only a few days for reservation anyway. When I asked for a romantic place, I never dreamed it would be this romantic. I'm not dressed up enough for this. This is the kind of place you take someone to propose. Just so it's clear, I'm not going to propose. I know that's silly. I'm just really happy it's so romantic. John could only hope that the place would be nice. All he knew about it was that his parents said it was nice back when they were together. They entered and Lizzie was delighted by everything. The decor, the menu, the lighting, the food. Or maybe she was really just delighted with one thing, the event itself. Fortunately, the staff seemed to find her adorable instead of disturbing, so John found himself relaxing. Even when they were just chatting idly, Lizzie was nice to be around. Midway through the meal, he realized that Lizzie was resting her hand on the table. She wasn't necessarily inviting it, but if he stretched, he thought he could put his hand on top of hers. Full romance. Lizzie's eyes went wide when he touched her, for a moment just staring as if she couldn't believe it. But after a moment, she gave him a brilliant smile and laced her fingers through his. Okay, he hadn't meant to do that, but John decided he could just awkwardly hold her hand while they ate. That certainly seemed to be Lizzie's intention. She actually wasn't getting a lot eaten since she didn't talk with her mouth full and listened raptly whenever he talked. But at least she seemed to be having fun. After a while, Lizzie patted her mouth with her napkin and sighed in satisfaction. She didn't let go of his hand, though. That was wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. Yeah, it's all really good. Not the food, the date. Oh, I made you talk so much. You haven't gotten any to eat very much. That's okay, No, I'll be quiet and watch while you eat. So, Lizzie, how about you tell me where you live? Oh, it isn't too special. Just a house. Do you live with someone? I know not your parents, but some other relative. No, it's just me. Abby inherited the house, I think, and she didn't manage to sell it off when things got bad. Abby? My mother. She was an awful woman. I don't want to talk about her. It's a nice enough house, I suppose. Abby wrecked a lot of it, but I've been able to repair it with money from James. Your father? I guess. But he never cared enough to meet me. Abby always complained about him, and the checks don't always come. But I don't want to talk about that. It's all horrible, isn't it? People who can't even pretend to be in love just tear into each other. That's not what I want. Not at all. When I fell in love with you, I knew it would last forever. Wouldn't it be nice for us to get a house together? Maybe even build one? So many choices, I can't decide. But I want it to be something we choose together, not something we inherit. Some place where we want to live together forever. Maybe a big house, big enough that it can have lots of nice windows, but also rooms inside where no one can see us. Maybe a fountain. Lizzie giggled and squirmed in her seat till she couldn't contain herself. Her fingers in his gripped so tightly that it almost hurt. But now I'm just saying things. None of those things really matter. The only thing in our house that I'll care about is you. It was the longest he had yet gotten her to talk about herself or her goals. And while I was still pretty focused on him, he didn't mind hearing the details. That's a very nice image, Lizzie. I'm glad you think so. And you finished your food. This has been wonderful. Can we go now, can we? Only slightly worried about what she was thinking, John paid the bill, trying not to wince, and then they left the restaurant. They got onto the bus, and Lizzie never let go of his hand the entire time. He began to wonder when she was actually going to let go, and that was when she leaned her head against his shoulder. This feels so nice. Yes, it does. Really? You enjoyed tonight? I did. It's not often that I hear you talk about things you want, other than, me. It felt ridiculous to say that, like some kind of boast. And a second later, he realized that might just be exacerbating her problem, or at least making light of it. But Lizzie just considered his words thoughtfully, then gave a slow nod. I've always wanted to know everything about you, John. I'm glad you want to know about me. John, would you like me less if I stopped taking the medicine? Shit, what was he supposed to say to that? John desperately racked his brain for a good answer. I like you, Lizzie. I like the person you really are. Is the person you are now the person you really are? What do you mean? I mean, when I get depressed, I don't feel like myself. Medicine might change me, but it's just to change me back to myself. But it's not who you naturally are. Does that matter? I mean, we get to choose who we are. Otherwise, we're not really people, just animals. So, who are you, Lizzie? You seem like a nice person now that I've gotten to know you. Is this not who you want to be? Did you feel better before taking the medicine? But you liked me tonight. Tonight was wonderful. But I'm not suggesting I didn't like you before. Silly John, don't worry about it. I love you no matter what. Now, would you like to see my house? John froze, not sure how to take the question. Then again, Lizzie had already seen his house. Maybe she just wanted to open up. He said he'd like to hear her talk about herself, after all. If she was actually offering to let him into her life a little more, it would be stupid of him to turn it down. Sure, Lizzie, I'd love to see it. I'm sure you will. Absolutely sure. He'd planned to take her to her stop just to be gentlemanly, but now John found himself getting off at the same place. Lizzie eagerly set off from the bus stop, looking back to make sure that he was following. In the end, she led him to a small house. It was a cozy little thing, much warmer and more pleasant than he'd expected. Here it is. It's cozy. You don't need to flatter my house, silly. All that matters is that we'll be there. She led him inside and showed him around. That was a very strange and erratic tour. He wondered if this was the first time she'd ever shown someone around her house. The inside of the house was less cozy than the outside, not because of the house itself, but because of how bare it was. A few rooms looked as though they hadn't been used, but the rest looked like they were out of a catalog. It mimicked a house, but didn't look like a place where anyone lived. The only thing that didn't match the catalog image was a heavy metal door off a side hallway. Lizzie didn't make the slightest reference to it or even seem to notice it existed. This picture, is it your mother? Oh, that. I forgot I even had that. Lizzie didn't seem to care, but John was curious enough to pick up the frame and look closer. He was surprised to find his hand immediately coated in dust. It had to be years of dust. How could Lizzie have lived here for so long and never even disturbed a picture sitting on a table like this? In any case, you could see where Lizzie got her good looks from. But other than that, she and her mother didn't look very much alike. There was something in Lizzie's eyes and posture that was just lacking in her mother. She was on the beach with some man. Neither of them looked like they were enjoying themselves. Maybe he was imagining things, but he could practically see the growing enmity between them. Absurdly, his mood began to decline. It was just a random relationship from people he didn't know. It had nothing to do with him, yet the idea of people producing a child from a relationship they obviously cared so little about sent him into a spiral. John? John, you shouldn't be sad. Our house wouldn't have anything like this in it. No, I was just, Don't worry. I want to be around you every second of every day of forever. But I know that wouldn't work when we grow up. I can get a job, good at lots of things. It will be sad being apart, but we can call each other at work and send each other things. And when we get home and see each other again after so long, it'll feel so good. Her picture of the future actually sounded nice. Lifted a little of the cloud in his head, but he couldn't find a way to put that into words, and so he said nothing. Undeterred, Lizzie encouraged him into the living room and pushed him down onto the large couch. He hadn't seen much use, but it was free from dust and gloriously soft. You stay here, okay? Give me a moment to change out of this. John swallowed and stayed where he was. He didn't have a lot of experience, but he heard his friends talk about their exploits. He thought a lot of it was lies, but was there something to what they said? If Lizzie really came out wearing lingerie or something crazy, he didn't know what he'd do. He honestly didn't. Part of him, that had been asleep for a long time, liked that idea, fantasized about what might happen. Another part of him was incredibly nervous to even consider the idea of being close to her. He couldn't keep sitting there. His nerves would destroy him. Instead, John got up and began to look around the house more carefully. The dustiest part of the house seemed to have the remnants of Lizzie's mother. At least he didn't think Lizzie would be into cheap little glass figurines. Opening one of the rooms, he discovered that it was an unused bedroom. He was about to go when he spotted another picture frame sitting beside the bed. This one featured Lizzie as a child sitting on her mother's lap. It struck him so strongly that he immediately went to look at it more carefully, not caring that his hand got even dustier. Lizzie's mother was glowing and obviously proud of her daughter, while Lizzie ignored her entirely. No, not just ignored her. There was a flat emptiness to her eyes, as if they weren't even related. It didn't seem to stop her mother in the picture, but the distance between them was agonizing. Why would anyone keep a picture like that, much less frame it? John stared at it a while longer, then set it down and left the room. The look Lizzie had been giving her mother, those eyes shouldn't belong to a human child. John didn't want to think about it a second longer, so he rushed out of the room as fast as he could. Desperate for something to take his mind off that unpleasant thought, John looked around for anything else. The door next to the bedroom was jammed, but he wrenched it open and stared. The room was filled with pictures of him. His yearbook photos, but also lots of pictures of him in class, pictures she must have taken herself. Oh fuck. There were pictures of him sleeping in his own bed. For a moment, he just stood there, trembling. Then John snapped back to his senses. He immediately stepped back and closed the door, trying not to make a sound. He told himself he shouldn't be so surprised. He knew she was obsessed, but it still shook him. He was inside his stalker's house. John? Yes, I just wandered off. I'm coming back. Good. There's something I want to show you. John? Oh, shit. What are you doing with that axe? You don't trust me, John. That makes me so sad. You think I'm going to trust you when you're coming at me with an axe? I try to be patient. I can't wait any longer. So I need to take matters into my own hands. Hold still, John. The romance option. What's the worst that could happen? John did his best to stay in place, afraid that running would just make her chase him. But as she got closer, she scraped the axe along the wall and gave him a smile that was anything but sweet. This won't hurt very much, and then things will be better. Trust me. We have to trust her. Swallowing, John stayed where he was. Lizzie got even closer, her smile widening, and then her other hand came up. Instead of weapon, it held a dark rag. It was over his mouth and nose before he could react. Stunned, John only struggled instinctually. Then the chemical fumes overwhelmed him. John woke to the feeling of something tight on his wrists. At first he thought he must be tangled in the sheets, but when he tried to move his hands, they were stuck. The memories returned in a bitterly cold flood. Lizzie had actually knocked him out by force and brought him, wherever this was. His blurry vision slowly returned, and he could make out a rough basement around him. He could just see a heavy metal door at the top of a set of stairs. It looked as though there were shelves and tools around the walls, but he couldn't pay attention to those. Now with Lizzie staying in front of him, eyes fixed on his face. I'm glad you're awake now. Are you feeling okay? Okay, I didn't want it to be this way, but I don't have a choice. You're confused, John. You don't understand how much this matters. I'll help you understand. What are you going to do to me? Don't be afraid, John. Everything is going to be all right. I'm completely empty. There's nothing inside me. There's never been anything inside me. The emptiness craves something. I didn't understand what I needed for years and years. Eventually I realized that I needed a person. A specific person. But I didn't know who. Occasionally there would be a flicker of feeling. I'd watch someone for a while, but they were never what I needed. Nothing actually mattered. Until I met you. But why did... Let me finish. For so long I could barely even bear to look at you. The feelings were too intense. And then I couldn't bring myself to talk to you. I was afraid it would all just disappear. But the feelings didn't go away. They got stronger. You were made for me, John. You need to understand that. But you don't understand because you're confused. That's why I need to keep you here. You think this is going to help? It may be difficult at first, John, but you'll come to understand. I promise you will. After all, I have days and days with you all to myself. Days and days. John recalled that they were going into a full week of vacation. That meant she could keep him here a full 9 days before they had to return to school. That was no accident. She'd coldly planned the entire thing. Maybe she'd been manipulating him since before she even asked for the date. Part of him was terrified. Part of him was furious with her. And another part, his depression saw a twisted mirror of his own feelings. But the worst he'd ever done was say unkind things. Not this. Just what did she plan to do to him anyway? As he looked around the basement, he saw a lot of heavy tools. Some of the hammers and knives looked as if they'd been used. John slumped against the ropes, biting into the chair, and just wept.